What's going on, everybody? We're back with another video, and in today's video we're talking all about fat loss diets and strategies. So we're going to cover 5 of the most popular diets that you're all familiar with, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons, the similarities and differences, and how they actually work. So the 5 popular diets and strategies we're talking about today are low carb, ketogenic, paleo, flexible dieting, and intermittent fasting. Now, while these diets and strategies may seem very different on paper, they all work the exact same way in that they help you achieve fat loss through a calorie deficit. So let's start out with the simplest one first, the low carb diet. Essentially eating foods that are lower in carbohydrates, so reducing the amount of sugary foods, pastas, and breads, and consuming foods that are higher in proteins and fats. More often than not, people who are newer to dieting are going to gravitate towards a low carb approach for a few different reasons. Reason number 1, it's fairly simple. Just reduce the amount of carbohydrates you take in. Number 2, they were told that carbs are the devil and the insulin fairy is going to get them, so they're scared. And number 3, they know someone personally who was successful with low carb dieting, at least in the short term. So that's something that I see very commonly with people who start out on a low carb diet. They're pleased with the immediate results. In the first week or two, they've magically dropped about 10 pounds. They think it's 10 pounds of fat, but that rate of weight loss slows down dramatically because they didn't realize that the initial weight loss just came from a huge reduction in carbohydrates. So they're actually losing glycogen and water and not really so much fat. So after the first 2 weeks and 3 weeks and then month, things are really slowing down and they might actually hit a stall or a plateau, and then they have no idea what to do from there because they already cut out carbs. Now where do they go? So you start to see some mindless snacking and eating and not tracking certain things because it's hard to adhere to that type of diet. Next up is the ketogenic diet. So you're severely restricting carbohydrates below a certain level, and then your protein and fat intakes are going to be variable depending on the goal of the dieter. So we have a lot of people hopping on the keto train, and I'm going to cover that in a completely separate video, but people are confusing keto with low carb. They're different. The goal of the ketogenic dieter is to get their body into a state of ketosis where ketone bodies are being produced by the liver, and it's shifting their metabolism away from glucose and towards fat utilization. Usually we see anywhere from 5 to 10% of total calories coming from carbohydrates, so trace sources and vegetables, about 20 to 25% coming from protein, and then the rest anywhere from 60 to 70% coming from healthy fat sources. So again, keto might seem very similar to low carb, but they're very different when we talk about someone just eating low carb and then someone else actually being in a state of ketosis. Next, we have the Paleo Diet, which essentially just says, if a caveman didn't eat it, neither should you. So you're avoiding all processed foods, grains, sugars, breads, most dairies, legumes, trans fats, and artificial sweeteners. So pretty much you can't eat, or you have to run around with a spear and catch your food. But the only problem that I see with the Paleo Diet is that there are no real strict guidelines. You could talk to one person who follows paleo and someone else who follows paleo, and they're going to tell you that they might eat different foods, or this is acceptable and this is not. So it's a very restrictive diet, pretty much eating like our ancestors and hunters or gatherers. But again, the way that's defined is different amongst different communities and different people. So one person saying we had access to this and you can eat this, another person saying no, you can't. So paleo will help you lose weight because you're restricting a ton of different foods, but I think there are a few gaps as to what is actually considered paleo. I was actually doing a bit of reading and I came across this article by Alan Aragon, which I'll have linked for you guys down below, but it breaks down the different claims and evidence of the paleo diet. So you can see some of the topics covered here, such as the modern adaptations that were made, and there's plenty of research and evidence and sources to back everything up if you want to check that out. But if you just read over the conclusion, like I said, it's very difficult for people to actually define this. But this sums it up pretty well by just saying it's impossible to universally define the diet of our prehistoric ancestors due to widely varying intakes according to food availability and geographical location. Next up is the most popular amongst the fitness community, and that's flexible dieting, or if it fits your macros. So this is a less restrictive approach where 80% of your calories should come from minimally processed and micronutrient dense foods, and then the other 20% can come from whatever you desire. Now, this is personally the approach that I take. I try to avoid food avoidance. So I don't like to be very restrictive with my foods. I like to allow myself whatever I want, but within moderation. And this is the problem with the flexible dieting community, is that you see people posting pictures of pizza and ice cream and donuts because it fits their macros. Now, are they eating this shit all day long? Probably not, but they're giving off the wrong impression to people who are newer to dieting and trying to understand what flexible dieting means. So I use the 80-20 ratio personally. 80% of my foods, micronutrient dense, whole foods, minimally processed, bro foods. I have fiber minimum requirements. I'm getting my vitamins and minerals, plenty of fruits and vegetables. And then I give myself 20% of my total calories for discretionary calories. So maybe I want to eat a serving of ice cream, or I want to eat a cookie or a slice of pizza. Whatever the case is, I still work it into my macro numbers for the day, but the majority of my diet is still quote unquote clean. And last but not least is intermittent fasting, which is not a diet, but an eating strategy. It's an intentional period of not eating followed by a feeding window. So an example would be you fast for 16 hours and then you have an 8-hour eating window. Now again, intermittent fasting is not a diet. It's a strategy that helps people adhere to an eating schedule and fit their macronutrients within a certain window of the day. So 16-8 is the most popular one. So 16 hours out of the 24 in a day, you're fasting. The 8 hours, you're consuming all your calories and you're done for the day. This could be a very beneficial approach for people who have a tight schedule, or for people who don't like eating breakfast, or people who have a big appetite later at night. So there's nothing magical about intermittent fasting. It's just a way to control your eating and to control your hunger and appetite. Personally, I wish I knew more about intermittent fasting years and years ago when I was a bro carrying around a 6-pack bag with my meals so I can eat every 2 to 3 hours. Now, most people's schedules won't allow for that, and it's just an inconvenience. If you're working, you don't want to have to stop every so often to eat. If you wake up in the morning and you're not hungry, people say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You don't have to eat breakfast. So you can put off breakfast, eat your first meal at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then finish your last meal at 9 o'clock. That's your 8-hour window, and those are your calories for the day. For some people, that's easier. For some people, it doesn't work. But what I like about intermittent fasting is that you don't have to follow that rigid eating window every single day. You can use it as a tool in your toolbox like anything else. And on some days, you can intermittent fast if it works better with your schedule. Other days, you can eat every few hours if that's what you prefer. So now you guys are wondering, all right, cool. So what's the best diet for fat loss? That's why you came to this video. Each one has its own benefit and they all work in their own unique way. But they all work the same. We'll talk about that in a second. The low-carb dieters, they're cutting out tons of foods and they're reducing their carbohydrate intake. That's going to reduce their calorie intake. That's why they're successful. The ketogenic diet can be successful because you're pretty much eliminating an entire macronutrient. So while your carbs are extremely low and your protein's moderate, your fats are really high. Now, fats are more calorie dense than proteins and carbs, but for some people, it's easier for them to keep their total calories in check by just taking carbs out and eating those higher fat foods. The paleo diet, you're eliminating a ton of food, so you're being very restrictive with your diet. You're focusing more on minimally processed, micronutrient-dense whole foods, which are much harder to overeat, so that's why that could be successful. Flexible dieting, it allows people to stay within their macros because they're not being restrictive with their food choice. So when they get a craving for something, they can actually eat it, fit it into their calories for the day, not feel guilty about it, and not go over their total calories by cheating. So that's why that could be successful. And lastly, intermittent fasting is a way for people to manage their hunger, appetite, and total calories by restricting themselves to a feeding window. So out of those 5 dieting strategies and approaches, what is the best one for fat loss? I have no idea. That's for you to decide based on the information that I gave you, and you need to pick what's going to fit best in your lifestyle. What can you adhere to for the long term? What can you stick with? And it might be a combination of a few of the different strategies. But here's what it all boils down to. Medical and health issues aside, if you want to lose fat, you have to eat fewer calories than you burn. Unless, of course, the laws of physics don't apply to you at all, then go ahead and eat as much as you want. But if you are not in a calorie deficit, you are not going to be losing weight. End of story. So find which strategy or approach you could fit into your lifestyle and adhere to for the long term. So let me know in the comment section below what dieting approach you personally use, what's worked best for you, or what you're experimenting with, because that's the most important thing. Experiment and see what works best for you. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the support as always. If you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button. It really helps me out. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Turn the notification bell on so you get notified when I upload, and share it with a friend. Until next time, I'll catch you all in the next video.